The cannon is perfect. That's what makes it wrong.
God save us.
Alistair Drummond holds the bore gauge level, one eye closed, the way his father taught him. His father who ground gun barrels for 30 years and knew the difference between iron that holds and iron that gives. The gauge reads 4.2 inches. The Navy specification says 4.0. The official certificate on the wall, stamped and countersigned 2 weeks prior, says this cannon passed. 3 numbers. 2 of them agree. One of them is real. Carron Ironworks, autumn of 1760. 3 years old. Already the largest ironworks in Britain, built at the confluence of the River Carron and the ambitions of 6 investors who believed iron could be produced like cloth, in quantity, on schedule, to specification. The blast furnaces never go cold. You can see their glow from the high road at larboard, orange against the Stirlingshire sky. Drummond arrived that morning from Edinburgh, his leather inspection case on the seat beside him, his father's bore gauge wrapped in linen at the bottom. The Navy Board needed cannon. Carron had offered to supply them. The question, Drummond's question, was whether Carron's cannon were safe to fire. 4 hours on the foundry floor. He watched iron ore tipped into the blast furnace throat, lime and coke fed by the barrow load, men in leather aprons working bellows handles in rotating shifts. He watched the tap, liquid iron running into sand mold channels like a burning river finding its bed. And he watched a young apprentice, 17 at most, dark-haired, methodical, chalk a number onto each cooling cannon, then chalk it again on the wall above, a private record of something Drummond couldn't yet read. Then he picked up the bore gauge from the rack at the boring mill mouth, measured the cannon nearest to hand, got 4.2.
That one's for the first proof lot, Inspector. Navy specifications. 40 bore. Navy certificate on the board.
Drummond didn't answer Ramsay. He looked at the gauge, then at the certificate, then at the muzzle, perfectly circular, perfectly smooth to the eye, 4.2 inches to a calibrated instrument his father built. He wrote 4.2 in his notebook, underlined it. Page 1 of what would become the most contested factory inspection in Scotland's history.
3 decades, my father trusted this instrument above all else. Its precision is absolute.
Gideon Falconer found him there 20 minutes later. The director of works walked the foundry floor as though he'd invented it, which in several meaningful respects he had. The production system, rotating blast shifts, sand channel mold layout, the water wheel boring mill, was Falconer's design entirely.
I haven't accepted it yet. Our legal counsel has prepared the relevant notice. Company records are proprietary dig, but we're happy to supply a summary within the standard...
I have a bore measurement that doesn't match the certificate, Mr. Falconer.
Drummond. The dates. Just 3 days before I arrived.
My father made this gauge. He calibrated it against the Board of Ordnance standard in 1742. It's not the gauge that's wrong. Falconer's expression held. Not a guilty man's flinch, just the professional stillness of a man who's handled difficult things before.
Inadmissible.
The boring mill records. I'll want those today, not after dinner. Falconer reached into his coat, drew out a folded document, already sealed with the company mark, held it out as though it were simply the next item on his afternoon's agenda. Drummond took the document, broke the seal, read it, then read it again. because of the counter-signature at the bottom, dated 3 days before his own arrival at Carron. Commissioner Wyvern, the Navy Board's man in Edinburgh, the man who had commissioned Drummond's inspection, had already signed a legal notice blocking it.
8 months now. Red marks. They're not bore measurements.
The water wheel turned overhead. Drummond stood in the boring mill with a document in one hand and his father's gauge in the other, and understood that this inspection had never been an inspection. It had been managed before he left Edinburgh. The question was only how far the management ran.
Everything starts with what's written down, and everything ends with what isn't.
The young apprentice at the cooling shed wall watched him leave. He didn't look away, just held his chalk and Drummond's gaze for one long moment, then turned back to his row of numbers. The official channels took 4 days to close. Drummond worked through them one by one, the way a man checks every door in a burning building before admitting there's no way out. Day 1. The boring mill records, covered by the legal notice. Day 2. Interviews with the boring mill operators. 3 men arrived at the designated hour and answered in identical language, the kind of language men use when they've been told what to say. He wrote, "Coached testimony inadmissible," in his notebook. Day 3. The dispatch records for cannon shipped to Woolwich. In Edinburgh, he was told. Day 4. He wrote to Commissioner Wyvern requesting clarification. No reply. The foundry went on without him. The blast furnace didn't care about inspections. 6 hours on, 6 hours off, ore and coke and lime going in, liquid iron coming out. Men came in the cold morning dark and left in the cold evening dark, and in between they built something. Skilled work, the kind that compounds day on day. That was the thing about Carron he hadn't expected. It worked. The casting quality, for cannon that weren't then bored beyond specification, was among the finest he'd seen outside the Wealden Iron District. Falconer had built something real here. The falsified records didn't make the furnace less impressive, only more frustrating. The man was capable of excellence. He'd chosen not to carry it all the way through.
Yes, Mr. Falconer. This one is good.
On the 5th day, the young apprentice found Drummond in the cooling shed at dusk.
Falconer, good to see you.
And you are?
Drummond, ready for the test? Inspector Drummond, good survey. I'm glad you're still here. Parliament's committee wants a preliminary...
Drummond looked at the wall above the cooling bed. Rows of chalk marks, cannon numbers, bore measurements, dates. The same private record he'd noticed on his first day. The numbers were neat and small. The young man had a surveyor's hand.
The official records aren't right. I needed to know how often.
Show me the Navy proof lot. Keir went to the 3rd section of wall, behind the last cooling bed, where the light barely reached. The chalk marks there were the same as the others, mostly. Bore measurements, dates, cannon numbers in sequence, except a third of them had a second mark beside the bore measurement. Not a number, a line, in a different chalk, red, not white.
Red marks are the ones I measured twice because I thought I'd made a mistake. 4.2, 4.3, same answer both times.
The red marks were not scattered. They were concentrated in one section. Drummond moved the lantern slowly along the wall, date by date, number by number, and the red marks clustered in the weeks surrounding one specific date, the date the Navy proof lot was dispatched to Woolwich. He stood in the cooling shed for a long time. The iron in the cooling beds ticked as it contracted. Keir stood 3 paces back and said nothing.
We will proceed with the immediate cessation of production.
Who selected them?
I trust you understand. My expectations remain unchanged.
Drummond wrote that down. The date range, the cannon numbers, the young man's name, and the word he wrote carefully and underlined, independent.
Drummond.
Falconer.
You'll be cited as a material witness in a parliamentary inspection. That gives you statutory protection. I am the inspector. I'm telling you that directly.
He believed it when he said it. The statute was real. What he hadn't fully reckoned with was that a statute is only as strong as the men who enforce it. And the men who enforce parliamentary inspection statutes answered to Commissioner Wyvern.
Where are the certificates for the boring?
He left the cooling shed with Keir's chalk marks in his head and a clearer understanding that the official process he'd trusted his entire career was not a tool of justice. It was a tool. And the man who'd designed this obstruction had his hand on the handle from the other end. Back at the Stenhousemuir lodging house, he opened his notebook to a fresh page. At the top, he wrote one word: Wyvern. Commissioner Wyvern arrived at Carron on the 9th day, carrying a letter from the Navy Board and the manner of a man who'd arranged everything before he walked through the gate.
300 figure of speech, I know their names.
50-something, broad-shouldered, the florid color of a man who dined well and often. 20 years serving the Navy Board in an administrative capacity, never at sea, never near a cannon in anger, but expert in the paperwork that decided which foundries got contracts and which ones got passed over. He greeted Falconer with the ease of men who've met before on comfortable terms. He greeted Drummond with the studied neutrality of a man who has decided on his position and is waiting for the other person to discover it.
I need the specific cost of my complicity.
Yes. I propose a correction period of 6 months for the boring mill process, subject to independent quarterly measures.
The inspection isn't complete, Commissioner. I still haven't had access to the boring mill records.
Board of Ordnance certified. Not negotiable.
A practical resolution. Drummond had heard that phrase before. It meant, find a number everyone can agree on. It meant, the records aren't necessary if the summary figures look acceptable. It meant, beneath the courtesy and the Navy Board letterhead, close your notebook. That afternoon he walked into the counting house while Falconer was briefly at the furnace. Wyvern's correspondence case lay open on the side table. On top, a bill of receipt for Flemish timber delivered to a property in Commissioner Wyvern's name at a private address in Leith, dated 6 weeks prior, stamped with the Carron Company trading mark. He did not take it. He wrote the details in his notebook: date, address, timber quantity, the Carron stamp, and returned the paper to exactly where he'd found it, with the precision of a man who knows what inadmissible means in court.
Ensure it's precise to the Board of Ordnance standard.
The proving yard was behind the main works, a long strip of earthen bank, scored and blackened from previous firings, the great Scottish sky flat and grey above. 3 Carronades had been prepared for the official test. The loading sequence was standard. Drummond watched every step. First, cannon. The flat concussive report carried 3 miles across the Stirlingshire farmland. Ball struck true. Wyvern made a tick in his notebook. Second cannon, clean. Another tick. Falconer's expression was carefully neutral. The third cannon. The ignition was correct, the charge within specification. The sound it made was different, not the clean crack of the first two, but something with a flaw inside it. A millisecond of wrong before the main report. The ball went down the bank at a shallow angle. Ramsey was at the barrel before the smoke cleared, hands running the metal.
The bore opened. Slight, but it's opened.
Drummond walked to the muzzle, took his father's gauge from his coat, measured. 4.3. Wyvern came to stand beside him, not to look at the gauge. He didn't look at it. He looked at Drummond, and his voice, when it came, was very quiet. The kind of quiet that's practiced. Drummond looked at him across the smoke. The timber bill in Leith. The counter signature dated 3 days before his arrival. Keir's red chalk marks on the cooling shed wall. His father's gauge reading 4.3.
I won't.
Wyvern held his gaze for 3 full seconds, then turned and walked back toward the counting house. The way he walked said this was not finished, only moved to a different room. Drummond measured the bore again, wrote 4.3, wrote the date, the time, the weather, the cannon's identification number. He wrote it all down with the steady hand of a man who has decided the pen is the only weapon he has and intends to use it exactly. Falconer came to him that evening. No secretary, no legal notice. He knocked on the door himself and asked if they might speak without the notebooks. Drummond let him in, put the notebooks in his case. That was the only concession he made. They sat across the table, the factory inspector and the director of works, while outside the Carron blast furnaces burned orange against the dark, the way they'd burned every night for 3 years, and would burn tomorrow. And the boring mill certificates for the original Navy lot. Falconer looked at the window. Outside, the furnace glow pulsed. His foundry, alive. They were false. You know that's not the argument, Mr. Falconer. Falconer looked at the etching on the wall behind Drummond. The Coalbrookdale Iron Bridge, Abraham Darby's iron spanning the Severn. He'd hung it there himself when he came to build Carron. Darby had solved his iron problem honestly, just kept improving until the iron was right.
Watch the pressure. Open the valve. Careful there. Steady, lads.
No, they're not. He let that sit. Falconer wasn't wrong. Not about the families, not about the wages, not about what this foundry meant to Falkirk. The cost of a voided contract wouldn't fall on Falconer or Wyvern. That too was true. Here's what else is true, Drummond said. Wyvern is taking timber from your trading agent. Bill of receipt, Leith address, Carron stamp. He countersigned your legal notice 3 days before I was commissioned. He told me today to falsify the proving yard record. He put his notebook on the table. I'm going to write a report distinguishing 2 separate failures. The engineering failure, bore specification, false certificates, the Navy proof lot, real, needs fixing, and the obstruction of a parliamentary inspection, implicating Wyvern directly and you indirectly. Those aren't the same failure. They don't carry the same consequence.
Open the tap. Guide it toward the central channel. There's the holes on the right. Push it harder. Keep the flow steady.
A correction period, 6 months, for the boring mill process. Independent quarterly measurement. If Carron meets specification, the Navy contract recommendation is conditional approval. You'll keep the foundry, but the deception goes on the record. Wyvern faces the harder accounting, and Kier's documentation is formally entered as independent evidence. Falconer was quiet for a long time. The furnace outside pulsed. The lamp between them made their shadows long and steady on the wall.
Edinburgh, Drummond's office. New assignment.
And the boring mill operators get external training. Board of Ordnance certified. Not negotiable.
Falconer stood, buttoned his coat, left without shaking hands. The man had just agreed to be held accountable. That was the only handshake that mattered. The report ran to 14 pages. Engineering section first. Bore variance, concentration of out-of-specification pieces in the Navy proof lot, precise, calibrated, nothing asserted beyond what the gauge showed. The deception section he wrote twice. What he saw, when he saw it, what it showed. The timber receipt, Wyvern's instruction at the proving yard, verbatim. He wrote Kier's section last. Independent quality records maintained by personal initiative over 8 months, Exhibit C, with the quiet satisfaction of a man acknowledging work that deserved acknowledgement. Wyvern was suspended before the month was out. The Navy Board gave Carron a 6-month provisional contract with quarterly bore audits. The foundry stayed open. The families kept their wages, most of them. Kier's chalk records went into the parliamentary archive. The originals on the cooling shed wall were whitewashed over in 1763, but the copies held. Power doesn't corrupt everyone who touches it. It reveals them. Falconer had been revealed, capable of both the foundry and the deception that protected it. Drummond had been revealed too, not by power, by the absence of it, by a bore gauge and a notebook against a legal notice, and a commissioner who told him what to write. What was revealed in that proving yard and that lamplight was someone who would not write what the number didn't say. Not a hero, a man who measured accurately and wrote it down. The world needs more of those.